I'd like to begin our meeting today, if you would please, by announcing that once again we have live streaming of the meeting along with a video recording. And so if you wish not to be part of that record, stay out of range of the cameras in back. I'd also like to comment that when we get to item 11A, the Treasurer and the Finance Committee have put all of the kind of numbers that we're going to be talking about on a video image, and so we'll bring the screen down from behind me and you will be able to see the kind of proposed 2014 budget numbers that the Treasurer will be talking to us about. With those introductory remarks, I'd like to go to the first item on our agenda, which is a report by representatives of the Oakmont Golf Club. 18 months ago, the OVA and the OGC, along with the City of Santa Rosa, signed a joint agreement that called for eventual decommissioning of the Oakmont wastewater treatment plant. And in its place, the city would give OGC approximately $2.7 million to transform the look of the golf courses through use of drought-resistant vegetation, to rework the course's irrigation systems, and to increase water storage capability through a new lake on the driving range. Since then, OVA hasn't had an update on progress, but we've had a lot of rumors and a lot of residents asking questions of it. And so we're really very pleased today to hear from Frank Giannini and Scott Stewart, who were about where that plan that the OVA and the OGC and the city signed off on stands. Both of them are OGC directors, and Frank is the OGC project implementation manager. So Frank, you want to take the microphone and please bring us up to date. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, John. My role with the irrigation project is to be project manager and the liaison between the board of directors and the contractor, who is Watworth Construction, who is a very big contractor. They do a lot of work in the United States and all over the country. They have started the project and they're really moving along very well to our satisfaction. I will the project is a big one. Like John said, it's $2.7 million, and that's a lot of money. And we're really moving along on it quite frequently, very fast. And they've Progress billed us a good sum to date for just the material. The total material of the job is on the job right now. So that shows you how fast they're moving. Our schedule, I won't elaborate on the schedule, I'll let Scott do that, our course superintendent. But if you have any questions having to do with the contractor, I'd be very glad to answer them. If you have questions having to do with the course, Scott would answer those. And I have also, which John failed to mention, which I didn't tell him till late, that our golf pro, John Thilat, is also here, and he will give a little spiel on the golf progress while we're doing the construction. So with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to Scott and get him to give you some rundown on what's going on the course and schedule.
Hello all. Oh, talk into the microphone. How about that? Okay. So we are right on track with our schedule of the irrigation installation. We have completed the short side of 10 fairway, 11, and number 12 west, and are finishing up 13 today, being the small par 3 with the lakes. From there, we're going over to number 17, and at the same time, we're also installing the mainline gate valves that need to be replaced that have not worked, well, at least since I've been here for 6 years, but I gather they have not worked for about 20 years. And that's part of the reason we go through these dry spells and burnt out turf and whatnot, because we cannot isolate our water amongst the golf course. So this construction project not only is helping us conserve water, but save the valued turf, our greens, our tees, and just get on a much more efficient irrigation cycle program instead of having to guess when my next pipe is going to break, and how to isolate it, how to fix it, etc. With this project, we also are getting one of the finest irrigation systems that are out there today, being the Toro Lynx computer system. It's going to involve 12 turf guard sensors. These are sensors that will be placed in the ground amongst the golf courses, mainly the greens and tees. They detect temperatures, salts, and moisture, and project graphs and help me with my irrigation cycles to, when we get it all in place and get the schedule going, it'll eventually be to actually prevent watering 7 days a week. We can now only water 2 days on, 1 day off, and this will all be a projected prediction with scientific data from my computer system, mapping out the golf course, taking a lot of the golf cart rides and time spent, looking at this green and that green. I'll actually have a projected picture on my screen of my actual virtual golf course. It's very exciting for me as well as the staff, because as we all know, I only do the job as good as my tools allow. With that, we will be able to, we're installing a transfer pump to, as everyone knows, the big deal was our water treatment plant was closed, and we're on city water for the time being. After this is all done, we have a transfer pump going in on the East Lake, and that will allow me to depend solely upon my wells that feed the East Lake, and then transfer over to the west and just further manage the aquifer that is part of the Oakmont Golf Course. And that's pretty much the sum of it. I'm going to be able to control the water to the greatest ability possible with the technology that's available today. Any questions?
I have a question. When are you going to start putting in the native grasses? Because that's really how most of us who live on the golf course will kind of notice the change.
The native grasses are going to go up as the irrigation is completed.
Okay.
It's on the plan, but being the trenching and the digging, that the contractors need to see the grade, the surface area where they're digging, obviously. But then there's, per plan, they're going in pretty much out of play areas. Yes, a lot of them are next to people's houses. I know when people think of native grasses, they think of tall, bushy stuff like we have in some of the creeks where we've let them grow and grow and grow. It's not going to look like that. I plan to have it at the most a 6 to 8 inch height. It'll be mowed probably once a week, twice a week, depending on how it grows, how the season is. And then I also plan to give it a little shape, a little character. We're talking, some more about that. It's not going to be the jungle that you kind of see around some of the
So
creeks.
it's not going to look like, when I think of native grasses, I think some of us thought it would look like the grasses in front of the Central Recreation Center. It's not going to look like that. Yeah.
I believe, I didn't take that too good a look at it. I think that's kind of a carrot grass, kind of bushy little humps. No,
okay.
This is going to be grown out turf to a taller height. The plan is, while establishing, I'm going to have to water it frequently. But after it's established and I get the roots in the ground, that's part of the big part of this conversation. We will only be watering it. Goal is 4 times a year. So it will be a little brown, but there will be some green in there, and it won't be this dried out jungle. any kind of threat to any of the homeowners for fire or anything like that. I know I've had lots of people, of course, approach me on the golf course and have asked the same question. Good question.
Same question.
What is it over here? What is your timeline? Just curious.
The back 9 West is the first phase of the project, and we plan for November 1st is the tentative date right now. As long as we don't have a major storm event, we're right on track for around November.
So the total project will be completed.
Well, phase 1 is the back 9 West. That's a complete reconstruction, pipe, wire, controllers, everything. The east is just a sprinkler and controller change out and wire. That part is and actually we're starting some of that now with the mainline gate valves to help that procedure. That works kind of tentatively right now, hopefully at the start of next golf season, around April. And again, folks, please don't hold me to any of these dates. If we have a major rain event, obviously it involves a lot more with erosion, and we can't dig in mud and backfill and get compaction and all that stuff that goes along with construction. So far, it looks like it's going to be a dry one, so I believe we'll be right on track.
And Scott, the west course, front 9, is that what's being done there? Is that the same as what's being done on the east course? Sprinklers, control boxes. Actually,
the front 9 West, where the controller change out is almost complete. They have 4 more controllers, including the driving range to retrofit and change out to the new VP network, part of this link system. And then the sprinklers on the front 9 are actually going to be done by myself and my crew over the next 2 years, and we'll be taking care of that. Because the front 9 West was rebuilt in, I believe, 1984, and so it's the newest 9, and that's why you see the difference between the back 9 and the front 9, because the front 9 is what's called valve and head, and so each sprinkler I can control from irrigation controller, like we're doing now with the back 9 West. So there's just a lot more control. That's where my computer programming is. That's where all my controllers. Put it this way: there's 965 stations on the front 9, and there was only 200 on the back 9. So that's how much more control I have over the front 9, and that's right now. And that's why usually always the front 9 is much greener and much more consistent, because I just have so much more control over the front 9 than I do the back. That's part of the reason we're doing this big project.
Is the same contractor that's working there now on the new underground work the one that's involved in the installation of native grasses?
No, he's part of the prepping it, but myself and my crew will be doing the installation of the native grasses.
Since some of these areas where you're planning to put native grasses, according to the maps that we saw, are actually adjacent to regular turf in a homeowner's yard or homeowners association, is there any planned effort on your part to try and coordinate with those property owners about any kind of changes they may wish to make?
Absolutely.
How will that be carried out?
I've already been in contact with a couple of the homeowner associations and been involved in some of there's certain instances where some of the irrigation or their trees encroach on our property, and the same for my trees and some of my irrigation when I have wayward sprinklers. Apologize for all of you that I watered your house at 3 in the morning and woke you up. And I've been here for 6 years, so I've kind of been amongst the ranks and amongst some of the homeowners. I've met several of you over the years and helped out with those wayward sprinklers, and also helped out some of those homeowner association getting tree trucks and whatnot. So that's I've been well involved enough that they've already come to me with some questions and some concerns.
Thank you.
It's all about working together.
Next, Frank.
John Dilade will give you a little input on what's happening with the golf.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's an exciting time for some, and for some it's very frustrating. So it's exciting for us knowing that the golf course is going through a great renovation that's going to really make some improvements. That's going to really enhance the playability of the golf course, and I think it's going to really, in the end, attract more golfers to come play. This is my third venture in golf course in this area. One was at Fountain Grove and one at Foxtail. And the one thing that I did learn very early was that communication is very important. So I understand that people have concerns, and please feel free to call me in my office if you have any questions, because it's best to get hopefully the answers from us that we know the best way to answer that, instead of from rumors or whatever. And if I don't have the answer, I'll get that for you soon. So it's important that we are together on this, and we cooperate with the concerns of the homeowners, because that's a big concern. One of the challenges at the golf course is just keeping business going when you're under renovation. So we've tried to keep a modified 18 holes open on the west course at all times, meaning that on one hole, we've converted a par 5 into 2 different holes. So number 3, being a par 5, is now a par 3 and a par 4, and we are closing one hole at a time on the back 9. And then in the coordination of that, we have scorecards that change almost on a weekly basis, and we have a lot of tournaments that have come out and played. So we have to, be careful of the relationship we have with them too, making sure that they understand that what's going on, and we give them a 20% discount, so they'll come back next year. So, and the years to come. So, like I say, it's just a very positive thing for the golf course. We're very happy to make these changes, and we just hopefully everybody can understand that by next year, the course will be in great shape. But please feel free to contact myself or Scott or Frank, any questions you have, and hopefully we can give you the right answer. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'd like to personally thank the OVA and OGC for putting on such a great parade. That was wonderful. And I'll tell you, it just was just a glorified thing to be there and to watch all the camaraderie, and it was just a wonderful thing. And I thank you for that personally. And thank you for the opportunity of having the OGC come here and talk to you.
Frank, a couple of questions.
Oh, yes. Do you have any questions?
Maybe I can start out.
Yeah.
Tell us about your understanding of the adequacy of water supply, with the city dropping out of the picture and the pond not being added to the driving range.
Yeah, well, we're doing a lot of research. We've, to date, I've had Meeks, they're a well digging company. I've had them come out and test wells. One of the wells was at the church, where the church has a well there, and we didn't know how much water it produced, but it was very close to where our main line came from the wastewater treatment plant. So it looked kind of hopeful that we would be able to get water from that well or the golf course to make up for what we weren't going to get from the city anymore. Well, it worked out that it only pumped out about 75 gallons a minute, and we got to be looking at about 240 a minute. So consequently, that plan didn't work. And there's a couple of other things we have in the fire, and I'm not at liberty to say basically what they are. The one plan we do have that we have pricing on is from Meeks. They have given us a price to do a new well for $80,000, and that's a fairly good price. And that's a 700-foot well with a pump, the whole works. So if in fact we can't find water or another source of it from somewhere else, that's probably the avenue we'll take.
And is it your projection that the 2.7 million is going to be adequate for doing these things?
We hope. The bids for the job came in rather high, and we had to do some value engineering, which worked out, helped us with some contingencies we have on the bid, and we're hoping that we have enough to finish what we're doing. Like Scott said, we've decided that we're going to buy the head for the front 9 on the west and install them ourselves. That was taken out of the contract through value engineering. And there's a couple of other things that we might be able to pick up some money on if in fact they materialize. But until they do materialize, it doesn't even help to talk about. One of them I could talk about because we're going to have some knowledge of it in a couple of days. We plan to cross in 4 different places in Oakmont. 3 of them are on Oakleaf, and 1 of them is on Pythian. And in the event that the pipes that are coming under the street there now are large enough where we could actually just cut the ends off and sleeve them, that'll prevent us having to get the city involved with the streets and the sidewalks and all that. So it would realize a nice change order for us, and if that materializes, but there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. So that's just one of the areas that we're looking at to save some money. But I'm really happy with the way Wadsworth is working, and they're a great contractor.
Thank you.
Frank, on the subject of water, I'm far from being a hydrologist, but all these underground systems are connected somehow. I don't have any clue how, but I do know that the Ledson project across the road is planning to put in a well. And if they start pumping out of the same aquifer, that conceivably could have a detrimental effect to the golf course, I would think.
Well, from an engineering standpoint, I can't answer that because I'm not an engineer, but you're right, that depending on how much water is down there will dictate how we do. And here again, I think, again, the well idea is probably one of our best. We've got done some research on where we would drill it, and it looks pretty promising.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for taking the time, bringing us up to date.
Thank you for having us. I appreciate it.
I note that we have a quorum, and so I will call the regular board meeting to order. And the first item is to adopt the meeting agenda. And in connection with adopting the meeting agenda, I'd like to note one change on consent calendar item 6C1. I've been requested by Teresa Woodrum to change the name of the stretch and body conditioning class to Oakmont Health Initiative. Aside from that, if there are no other changes, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Moved by Herm. Seconded by Herm Hess. All in favor? Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the members' open forum. You've seen the microphone is warm over there from Frank's efforts. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'd like to make comments on the office building that this board is considering building. I think that Oakmont is badly in need of a permanent home for its offices. I think it's a good idea. I like the idea of a central area where everything that you need, almost everything, is in a place where people would expect to find it. I think that for some businesses, leasing might be a good idea. And I'm thinking of law offices that are constantly shrinking and growing and need to move maybe to a better spot downtown. and leasing would be a good idea for that kind of business. But for Oakmont, our offices are permanently here, and I think they should have a home of their own. I also think the architects have done a good job, and I believe that the board should consider one other factor, and that is we don't ask architects to only draw lines on paper for us. We look to them for vision, and I think that there is a vision being considered here to have our plaza in between the burger and the office and the central complex. Makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that it would be a very good addition and a smart one to do at this time for Oakmont. Thank you. By the way, I'm Susan Millard, 373 Greenfield Circle.
Thank you, Susan. No.
Yes, Herm?
Microphone, please.
Has your group come to a conclusion as to what the final footprint will be like for that building?
It's not my group. I'm just speaking as a resident, okay?
Sure.
Harriet Polk, 6347 Meadow Ridge Drive. I just would like to publicly thank John Taylor for his very prompt and very thoughtful responses to my emails. It's much appreciated and a very welcome change from the past.
I guess you're Johnny on the spot, John. Nancy Caldwell, 316 Mountain Vista Court. I have two things. I see on item 11F, you're going to discuss videography and live streaming. I want to strongly encourage, as I've done before, that you do video the workshops as well as the board meetings, because so many things do get discussed there that are very substantial and have a lot of impact on the residents of Oakmont. Secondly, I would also request that somehow you attach the manager's report to the board minutes that are published on the website, because as you can see from today's agenda, they're very, very substantial quite often and have a big impact on us. And if you're looking at it online and you can't see it, you have no clue what she might have said on paper or what transpired behind the scenes. So I would strongly encourage that to be published as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Seeing no one else venturing to the open microphone, we'll move to item number 4 on the agenda, which involves a number of announcements. The first one I'd like to offer is to comment on the fact that the manager search committee work has been completed, and Bill Anderson is in the audience to give us a final report on their activities.
Thank you, John and board. Yes, the OVA Manager Search Committee for 2013 was officially appointed by the board on July 10th and given a mandate to find 4 to 6 highly qualified candidates for the position of Manager, Oakmont Village Association, and to develop an updated job description that includes specific details requested by the board. Initially, we were a committee of 8, but for personal reasons, one member resigned after attending 3 meetings and making a real contribution. We continued on as a 7-person committee. The appointed committee began its work on July 15th when it held its first meeting to organize itself, review the existing job description, existing community description, and appoint members to review and update consultation with the manager. Additionally, the committee agreed to expand the search beyond the community manager world and reach out to include city managers. We also agreed to ask the Oakmont community for input on what characteristics they wanted in a manager. We held weekly business meetings every Monday at 2 p.m. except for September 9th through September 16th. Yesterday, at our final meeting, we reviewed and critiqued our search process, made suggestions for possible improvements, and began organizing our detailed records
for the OVA archives. At these weekly meetings, we planned and implemented job postings on websites that reached a broad audience, as well as more selective ones, such as community managers and city managers. We developed a series of behavioral questions to ask candidates and planned interviews. We reviewed resumes and graded them on a scale that meant suitable for an interview, possibly suitable, not suitable. We made appointments with selected suitable applicants for Skype video interviews and conducted interviews at times and dates mutually acceptable, meeting from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. throughout the week. Interview protocol involved having 3 committee members do the actual questioning on camera while the other 4 members observed. Then following each interview, we consulted on our impressions and tried to reach a consensus about the candidate. Rejected candidates received an email of thanks and condolences. After reviewing some 64 resumes and 7 business meetings, scheduling 16 Skype interviews and actually conducting 15, we selected 4 candidates to present to the board at an executive meeting on September 5th, 4 on-campus interviews by the board, candidates that we believe are capable of performing the job of manager. Among the 4 are 3 with community management experience and 1 with city management experience only. We believe the board will have an interesting and capable variety to choose from. I'd like to state that our committee worked extremely well together in a collegial fashion, with everyone participating and doing their best to conduct and complete our mission in a professional and timely manner. And for the record, our committee consisted of Brian Adams, Pat Amadeo, Bill Anderson, Kathleen Conley, Bob Giddings, Stan Lindsay, Noel Lyons, and Mike Noble. Any questions for the board? End of report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. And without applauding unduly, I hope the committee recognizes the kind of commitment that these people made. More than 60 hours individually over a course of just 60 days to get to the point of being able to recommend for the board's consideration these 4 candidates, which we will start interviewing on September the 23rd in on-site interviews. Because those interviews will go on through that week of September 21st and through September 30th, the board will not have a workshop session on the first Tuesday of October, which happens to be October 1st. But the board instead will use that for a personnel session to begin to evaluate the information that we learn through the process of our interviews. Finally, I want to conclude the announcements with a personal apology. Last month, at the conclusion of the board's vote on shades for the fitness center, I made some very uncalled for, snarky remarks about that project. They're inconsistent with the board's goal of civility, and I signed that and I intend to follow it. And so I apologize and will attempt to do better. The next item on the agenda is the Secretary's report of our executive meeting. Can you help us with that, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. The last executive session of the board was Tuesday, August 20th. All the board members were present. Also present were myself, Patricia Arnold, Andrea Alderman from the Architectural Committee, and Bill Anderson from the Search Committee. The meeting came to order at 3:45. We first discussed an enforcement matter involving the Architectural Committee, which was discussed and then rescheduled for a later session when the property owner could be present.
Excuse me, can you hold the microphone closer to your mouth?
Oh, sure. The second item was a review by Mr. Anderson, who just spoke, regarding the status of the manager search committee and what it had accomplished up to that point, which was virtually what he repeated here today. Then the president made assignments amongst the committee, amongst the board members and officers of various tasks for us to do and to participate in the process of reviewing these finals. Ms. Arnold presented information regarding our new facilities manager, Mark Rogers, facilities maintenance manager, and reviewed the facilities maintenance staff compensation plan, which the committee approved by consensus. Ms. Arnold also brought to our attention an issue regarding occupancy of rental properties, regarding discrepancies in reporting, and a new system for reporting was approved by the board by consensus. There were also 3 matters that were referred to collection by the board, and on a motion made and seconded by Mr. Felton and Ms. Diaz, the board unanimously voted to refer these matters to collection. The meeting adjourned at 4:45 p.m.
Thank you. Also listed in item 4B is the August 6th and the September 3rd special meetings that were brief meetings that the board held specifically on August 6th to approve funding for the plaza project, which we hoped would be underway by now, but is still being delayed by lack of a building permit from the city. And on September 3rd, we approved the West Recreation Center parking lot reconstruction and resurfacing project. The next item on the agenda, item 5, involves some recognition, which we're happy to pursue today. A lot of remarkable volunteer efforts go on in our community every day, but today we'd like to offer some specific recognition. And the first on the list for that is the Valley of the Moon Rotary. And I see that we have a whole contingent, a couple rows of Valley of the Moon Rotary. Would you all please stand up so we can recognize that you're here? Over the past 2 years, 14 street-side benches in Oakmont have been turned into sparkling resting places by these Rotary neighbors. It took a lot of hard work, but Cynthia Macariola? Cynthia Macariola Brooks was the project coordinator as the Rotary Director of Community Service for this project. Barb Spangler was president during the first half of the project when 8 benches was done, and Caroline Keller is president this year, and they have completed 6 benches. And so Caroline, if you can. The Oakmont Village would like to present the Community Service Award to the Valley of the Moon Rotary with sincere appreciation for the beautiful enhancement of street-side benches in Oakmont and for collaborating with Santa Rosa young people who are learning about creating public art through the Art Start program. Thank you. And the second recognition goes to the marvelous 50th Anniversary Committee. A plan in the works for nearly 2 years, a project greeted with little enthusiasm at the beginning that grew to a year-long series of memorable events. Bob Chapman was not able to be here, but Susan Millar is, and in connection with presenting her an award, she hasn't seen this yet, but Susan Gorin, First District Supervisor, presented to me at the beginning of the parade this resolution of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Sonoma. Whereas it all began when H.N. Berger and his wife Frances found the perfect place in the Valley of the Moon, sheltered by the mountains of Annandale State Park and Hood Mountain Regional Park, to develop the community of Oakmont. And whereas his vision was to build a community in a rural setting for active adults. And whereas on November 29, 1963, the Santa Rosa City Council approved the annexation of Oakmont, and H. Norwood, as owner of Fairfield Homes, along with his wife Frances, signed the papers. And whereas on April 1964, land usage zoning to allow Oakmont to be built was approved by the city of Santa Rosa, and Oakmont was incorporated. Whereas on July 31st, 1964, the first 4 home purchases were recorded. And whereas in 1986, in order to complete the construction of Oakmont, and faced with failing health, Burgers sold to Bill Gallagher and his brother Pat the remaining 480 undeveloped lots in Oakmont for subsequent development. And whereas Oakmont is noted as Sonoma County's premier active adult community with a peaceful setting of vineyards and golf courses, which affords leisure activities with freedom from home maintenance for residents over 55 years of age. And whereas Oakmont is home to 4,500 residents living in over 3,000 affordable single-story homes, where residents participate in over 125 groups and organizations. And whereas Oakmont is a community constructed around the golf greens and has established a community charter that encourages resident involvement and maintains a vibrant community that values civic engagement and preservation of the Oakmont community. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Supervisors of Sonoma County hereby congratulate Oakmont Active Adult Community on the occasion of their 50th anniversary. And to you, dear Susan, with grateful thanks and sincere appreciation for your creativity, energy, and leadership in bringing to our community a year-long series of exciting celebrations in recognition of Oakmont's milestone in active senior living. We have Bob's plaque here, Susan, and we'll work out an arrangement to present it to him. Sorry he couldn't join us. He's a regular wine taster on Tuesdays. Oh, pour it. Finally, we have recognition for our entire community, the best of Sonoma County senior living. Director Fran Diaz and I happily represented the community at the Press Democrat-sponsored awards ceremony, and we're happy to bring back for all of you the award. And it came in 2 parts. First of all is a framed plaque that we can hang in the office. But secondly, there's the larger poster, and we'll move this from the Berger Auditorium subsequently to the CAC, hoping that all of our members can enjoy the kind of recognition that came with the Active Senior Community Award. Next, we have the consent calendar with the one change in that consent calendar. Do I have a motion to accept it? Moved by John Felton, seconded by Evelyn. All in favor? Thank you. Then we'll go to item 7, and that's the treasurer's report. You going to give us the treasurer's report, John?
Sorry for the delay. You caught me off guard there. I was asleep at the switch. The month of August, we had revenue of $171,000 and expenses of $167,000, which gave us a surplus of almost $4,000 for the month. On a year-to-date basis, the revenue was $1,363,000, which was 7% better than budget, and expenses $1,206,000, which is 5% better than budget, giving us a surplus year-to-date of $157,000. The year-to-date contributions to the funds were all equal to or better than budget, with funds from the developer in the orchard of $414,000 for 28 new homes this year, and cash and investments, operating fund $675,000. Asset replacement, $1,446,000. Capital improvement, $1,219,000. Catastrophe fund, $97,000, for a total cash of $3,438,000. Any questions? Do I hear a motion to accept the report?
Moved and seconded. Thank you, Mr. Herman John. All in favor? Accept the report. Do you want to elaborate on item 7B?
Yes. As part of the Finance Committee's responsibilities, we review projects that are in place and compare the expenses to the approved amount from the board. And we had one project that went over. It was the AV system for the East Rec. The amount approved was $30,500, and the amount spent was $39,340. I asked Pat Barkley about this, who was, I believe, the project manager for this. He said there were various reasons for that. One was, as they mounted the projector screen, they found some problems because of, as he put it, the odd construction in the East Rec attic space. And another was they expected to use maintenance staff to do a lot of the electrical work, and it was determined that that wasn't the best idea, and so we had to use an outside electrician, which of course costs more money. And also Pat presented to the board in June the increased expenses from sound expressions. So those are basically the reasons behind that. I don't believe we need to do anything other than this, just informative.
If at some point the Finance Committee has a recommendation as to how we can, better manage this aspect of it, we'd be glad to have your input.
Well, we do see on a monthly basis the spending for each project and compare that to the budget. So as we see a project that's spending toward the approved amount, then at that point we need to raise the flag and start looking at it closer.
Thank you. Item number 8 on the report is the manager's agenda. All those present have a copy. I would just like to comment that this particular manager's report, I and I think other members of the board will find especially helpful because it should serve as an extensive aid for the transition to a new manager, because Patricia Arnold has brought to our attention some things that are on the front burner or on the middle burner or on the back burner that are going to have to be addressed after her departure. Things such as the East Pool swim lanes, automated pool chemical monitoring, the sauna at the Central Activity Center, an ongoing program regarding weed control and fire protection, walking path handrails and trash enclosures, and of course our OVA truck. Members of the board have any comments or questions regarding the manager's report?
Well, besides the fact it's an excellent report, there are some items on here that I presume that we will then place on the agenda in the near future as to board action on these items.
Absolutely. No other comments? Since this is Patricia's last official report for us, and it seemed like the only public opportunity that the board would have to recognize in a small way the contribution that she has made. And so with the board's concurrence, Fran Diaz and I had the pleasure of doing some shopping for local, practical art that we hope she will enjoy. So Patricia, would you please come forward? Oh, you have to unwire. We appreciate very much the kind of transition that you've made possible for us. And you can take time now and open these if you'd like people to see it, or maybe it might help unleash this one. Now you can slide it off that way on the bottom. like to tell her about the local art?
Lights.
But Patricia, after going through all of the exhibits that were provided to us from the art citizenry in this country, in this city, we picked out this because we felt that his work was superb, and I contacted him on the telephone and asked him if he would provide you with some of his own background and a story of the pottery as he had completed it. He assured me that that would be sent to me in the mail and that I will be handing it on to you.
Hello, you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. This is absolutely lovely, and I really appreciate it. It has been an honor to serve here, and I've enjoyed my stay very much.
We have no committee recommendations this month, and Tony Lackowitz told me he has no additional report as far as the Long-Range Planning Committee is concerned, so we can skip items 9 and 10 and go to item 11, which is the discussion of our 2014 budget. And so I'm again going to call on the treasurer with Mike Noble's computer help to work us through. Each of the board members has a printed copy of this, so we can look at what's on the counter, our manual in front of us, and hopefully if you move down close enough, you can see the figures on the screen that we're considering. Chuck, you want to go ahead?
Okay, this is the budget that the Finance Committee reviewed last month and is recommending to the board. The bottom line and top line, it has a 50-cent per month dues increase for each resident. And so we'll discuss this in some detail today. I won't go over every line, but I will point out the lines I think are important or that are large or have some changes. The top line, the owner's assessment, that's the regular dues paid by everybody every month. We have a current population, or when we started this, of 4,570 people. We got a count of the number of residents in the orchard that are still not sold, which were 29, and I've added that into the budget. 29 homes at 1.5 resident per home, which would bring up the total count of residents to 4,614. So the budget's all based on that. The second line, the assessment rebates, in the past we've put a conservative number in there. We've reduced dues by $10,000 a year, and in the last several years our population have increased as opposed to decreasing. So I'm taking that, I'm suggesting to take out that $10,000. Going on down, the new member fees. We have been carrying a budget of $20,000 for that, and you see there's a lot of real estate activity in the area lately. We've projected year is $53,000, so I'm suggesting increasing that from $20,000 to $35,000, which is $150 per person, which is only 233 new residents. So I think that's still very conservative. Going on down the page, trip revenue, $35,000. The beginning of this year, we split the revenue and expenses. In the past, they were netted together. So I've listed $35,000 here, but also $35,000 on expenses, which we'll see in a minute. So it's a net wash of zero. Next line down, the telephone directory revenue. We've changed providers this coming year. Our old provider is not playing the game quite kosher, so the new guy is having a little bit of trouble the first year, so we're conservatively reducing the amount from $24,000 to $16,000. Please, if anybody has any questions, ask me as we go through it as opposed to coming back to it later on. And I can't see you when I'm looking down, so speak up. Okay, going on down into the transfers to the various funds. The transfer to the CIF fund remains at $50,000. The transfer, the second line there is the transfer for the loan, the $12 a month. I've also increased that by the 44 new residents in the Orchard area. And the transfers to ARF. The study we got first from Tom O'Neill's group said $405,000 was needed. As he tweaked that and worked with it a little bit more, he said we could lower it down to $395,000 and still barely remain over the $300,000 required every year. Certainly, I would suggest that we keep it at the $405,000 to help these old buildings that we find ourselves with.
Before you go on,
yes,
for the transfers to the Capital Improvement Fund at $50,000, it's my recollection that prior to the development of the Central Activity Center, the budget included a $100,000 transfer. But
I believe that's correct.
But with that construction project underway, it was reduced to 50. What would it do if we brought it back up to 100,000?
It would be an additional, basically an additional dollar per month. You know, the head count times 12 is $55,000. So $55,000 equals $1 in dues.
Thank you.
Okay, and the last transfer is for the catastrophe fund, and it remains at $10,000. Going on into the expenses, our insurance provider is warning us that a lot of the policies that she's writing now for renewals is seeing a 20% increase. So some of the larger ones, I've added in a 20% increase, and we won't know what our policy is going to be for the renewal until it's too late for the budget. So the earthquake insurance increased from $35,000 to $42,000. The casualty and liability increased to $53,000. The office supplies on down, we were carrying at a $20,000 budget, reduced that down to $18,000. Okay, moving on down to movies and music. We were carrying a $5,000 budget for that, but where our run rate is about $9,400, so increasing that up to $9,200. The next line, this financial management contract, CFM, they charge us at 90 cents per resident per month, so increasing that as well based on the head count, not their fees increasing.
Excuse me again?
Yes.
I wasn't fast enough. Back on the music and movies licensing, what prompts that increase?
Well, basically, it's an increase over the budget because we didn't have the correct amount budgeted last year. We're paying for the Muzak as well as the movies, the licenses for those. And it comes to just over $9,000 a month. A year, excuse me.
Where do we have Muzak? We don't have an elevator.
There's a question back here.
All right. The Muzak insurance covers for when people are playing music in the pool, when the church is playing music, when when there's background music played at events here, you have to have it. You have to have insurance for it. And so it's not Muzak like elevator music. It is for playing the other music, and also someone coming and having a party and playing on the piano. Because of the kind of event this is, OVA has to have insurance.
Thank you.
Okay, going on down, the IT services and software, that's with a company called KLH that provides services for problems at the office as well as backup for our data. We had a budget of $3,000 for that last year. Our run rate this year was a lot, but we're increasing the budget to $9,000, thinking that will cover the needs for 2014. The Assist software, we're now using that, so we've got that in the budget this year. The legal services, we have been running a budget of $65,000 for the last several years, but we've never spent that much. This year, the projection is $49,000, so we're lowering the budget down to $55,000. Going on over to personnel training and certifications. Budget has been $4,000. We've started a training regimen with the office employees as well as the maintenance employees, and so we're suggesting increasing the budget for that to $8,000. The administrative incidentals, fondly noted miscellaneous. Last year's budget was $9,000. We're decreasing the budget on that to $5,000. And then the last account in this section, the trip expenses, again $35,000, which is the same as revenue on the first page. Okay, going on over to the salary section. The salary for the budget this year's for the admin is $340,000. We've increased that to $352,000. That's based on the actual rates of the current employees with a 3% raise, with the projected maximum that we have for a new manager in there as well. Going on down to maintenance is again based on the new actual rates for the maintenance department as well as the new maintenance manager. And since the maintenance department got a raise recently, most will not be eligible for a raise next year. Oh, and it also includes the one additional maintenance staff to cover the extended hours. Okay, going on down the page to the custodial and maintenance area, carpet cleaning. We had a budget of $14,000 last year. We've spent $0 so far for the year. So we've got a budget for $1,000 since instead of using outside carpet cleaning help, we're doing that in-house now.
Chuck?
Yes.
I have a question. Microphone, carpet and floor care.
Yes.
In 2013, the actual cost was $11,873. Current budget is $13,999 or $14,000. Yet the proposed budget for 2014 for this item is $1,000.
That's what I just said. That's just what I went over.
How is that
we're doing that in-house. We're doing our own carpet cleaning as opposed to having an outside service do it.
Okay.
Okay, go on to the grounds and maintenance. Midway down, the landscape other, that's for the high weed mowing. We had a budget this year of $10,000, and we've spent year to date $17,000, and so we suggest increasing that to $20,000. Going on down to the pools and spa supplies, we had a budget last year of $12,000. We've spent almost $24,000 projected for the year, so suggested increasing that, doubling that to $25,000. However, if you look at the three accounts below that, we had a budget of $2,500, $2,500, and $3,500. Spent very little and changing the budget for those to $500. So that's where the offset is. We're again doing most of the service ourselves on the pool. Okay, going on to the next page. The bowling green maintenance, basically no change on that. The current budget was $17,500, and suggesting a budget of $18,000 on that, but I just wanted to point that out since it's a rather significant number. Same with community bus down toward the bottom there, $60,600.
I have a question, please.
Okay.
On that item for the Bowling
which-
Green maintenance, is that not excessive? I mean, and who has that contract? Is it Scandia? Or do you know?
It's Scandia. Ooh, that's loud. Sorry, it is Scandia.
Patricia, why is that so high?
Because it's a very demanding, very detailed maintenance.
But that's over $365 a week for just that patch of green. I mean, it seems extraordinarily high, and I just think maybe we might go back and... Because that's almost half the price of the whole maintenance with Scandia for our entire association. And it just doesn't seem appropriate. I suggest that we, we'll look at it more closely. Though as demanding as it might be, it just seems disproportionate.
Okay, going on down, the patrol services remains almost the same, $15,600 last year, $16,000 this year. That's for the nighttime patrols of 2 people. And going down toward the bottom of that, security camera monitoring, we had a budget this year of $6,000, suggesting carrying that same forward to $6,000, even though we haven't paid anything yet for that. And finally, getting into the utilities, as opposed to, we break this now by the various facilities so we can track it better, but as opposed to going through all those individually, basically the gas, our projected for the year is $51,000, so we suggest keeping the budget the same at $63,000. Electricity, projected is $95,000, suggest keeping that the same at $108,000. Water is projected at $47,000, suggest $59,000 total. Telephones projected at $24,000 and suggest $27,000 for that. So going on down toward the bottom, we always throw in the contingency amount just to cover anything that we didn't think of before, generally somewhere in the 1% or just over 1% range. So suggesting that is a $40,780, which is also a rounding number that makes the dues come out to an even 50 cents. So if you go on to the next, on down toward the bottom there, Mike, that puts us at a budget break even, again with the 50-cent increase in dues. And you can see there how that's all broken out, the number of residents paying full dues, the numbers of ones that paid the lump sum previously so they don't pay the extra $12, and then the 44 new residents in the Orchard area.
And Chuck, do you still predict that those residents paying full dues will have that number changed as a result of paying off the loan in 2016?
Yes.
Mid-year?
I don't remember what the date is, but certainly with the new residents thrown in there too, that's going to pay it off that much faster.
Any comments or questions in general about the budget?
I have a question.
Hold your mic in your mouth.
The expected revenue that's before taxes, right?
We don't pay taxes. We're a nonprofit.
Okay, so the bottom line is that we do expect to have revenue in excess of expenses.
No, the bottom line is we expect revenues to be exactly equal to expenses.
Is that right?
That's what the budget says right here, is bottom line 0.
Question?
Yes, please.
Tony Lakowitz. What is the proposed salary range for the new manager?
the board authorized the job to be advertised at between $110,000 and $125,000 a year based on experience. I might also add, with that question coming up, Tony, that the board has regularly sought comparative studies on both our administrative and our maintenance positions, both, let's say, management and craft. The latest analysis that we have looked at has shown currently that we are at the bottom end of what the comparative analysis is. So that proposal to the search committee to do an advertisement reflects a step up from where we have been.
I might further counsel the board that if you have any questions or comments or concerns about the budget, now would be the time to talk about it, because next month in the October meeting, when we have to approve the budget, there will not be a manager that can answer questions here.
Excuse me, sorry, I was looking the wrong way.
Joelle Osling, 7358 Oakmont Drive. My mind just has a hard time getting around this with the one-time payment we made, what, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Was it $700?
I believe it was 800 something.
Okay. If we made that, and you have that money towards this amount that you needed for the building, and then the other people who chose to pay $14 per month, they stopped paying that after a certain length of time. Say maybe they only put in $300 or $400. Now, are you going to give me back the same amount of money?
We've discussed this in some detail in the past. Basically, the reason that the loan is being paid off early is because the additional amount that we're collecting is being paid toward principal, and we refinance the loan at a lower interest rate. And so the people that didn't make the lump sum payment are paying the same principal that the people that did make the lump sum payment, and they're paying additional interest.
Does that mean I'll get my interest back?
You paid no interest if you made the lump sum payment. You paid principal only because you paid in advance. The people that didn't pay in advance are paying principal plus interest. So they're paying way more than what you paid.
If they only paid a total of, say, $400?
Well, say $400 is not the right amount.
Well, I'm just picking something.
Well, you're not picking a right number.
Okay. Give me a amount. Are they up over the 800 now?
Yes, they're up to about $1,000 is what.
Thank you, that's what I wanted to know. Okay.
Pat Amadeo, I have a follow-up question on the same issue, because a number of us did pay the lump sum, and when we looked at the trade-off between paying the lump sum and paying it over time, we were given a certain set of figures on what the interest payment would be if we chose to pay it monthly. And it was based on that interest payment that we chose to pay the lump sum. But that interest payment is now substantially less than we thought it would be at the time. So many of us may have made a different decision. So I hope the board revisits the question again, because I do think, I mean, it's great. Let me just say, thank you for renegotiating the loan. But those who made the lump sum payment made that based on information that's now no longer accurate. Prorate the benefit and give us some money back. And extend the length of the loan for those who chose the monthly payment.
Any other questions as far as the budget? Excuse me. Yes, Bob.
Giddings, GC Lane. Use the mic, Bob. Thank you. This has nothing, well, I'm using it very well there. As John had mentioned earlier, or asked the question, Chuck, of lowering the contribution to the capital improvement fund by $50,000 annually. That occurred a year or so ago. Did I understand that correctly?
No, it occurred when the CAC went into effect. When the $12 a month started to be paid by residents to pay for the CAC, that's when the amount was lowered from 100,000 to 50,000.
Okay. And you mentioned the number of people anticipated paying dues, 4612 or 4618, for the projections of this budget. My only point or question is this: could the board consider, instead of making the dues increase for next year 50 cents, could they consider making it $1 and moving that additional, say, $55,000 instead of going to the capital improvement fund to the asset replacement fund? I mention this because all of you know past boards, past immediate boards, and people who are still on this board, past boards. So we've got very old buildings, and we have a number of unknowns coming up. And I don't know if it would be prudent, Chuck, in your estimation of this, but it'd be something I'd like the board to consider, just so we have as much money as we need in the asset replacement fund based upon unknowns regarding 50, 40-year-old buildings.
I'll also remember that last year, and I hope at the end of this year, any surplus that we have would be transferred into the asset replacement fund, and the surplus year to date is $157,000.
Correct. But I'm still asking us to consider the 50 cents additional. Again, just in general, I don't think anyone here is going to object to another 50 cents. Small.
And there you're wrong.
I may be wrong all over, but certainly somebody wanting to buy into this this nice community would not do it over a 50-cent dues increase. And this would help stabilize what we're going to face in the near future regarding these old buildings. My only point. I'll stop there. Thank you.
The other things that I see in the budget that I don't think need to cause any change in the projections that the committee has recommended, but may cause us as a board to consider what our policy should be, and that has to do with high weed mowing. There is no question that we have met the fire marshal's standards as far as cutting back weeds. They're a big project. Sometimes we have to call in others than our regular landscape maintenance staff to do it, but it gets done. But many residents, in terms of their contacts with me, have suggested that the board ought to have a policy of doing more than what is the fire marshal's requirement. I believe you can tell from the manager's letter that it's an aspect that, from her management point of view, she's been working at steadily the last 3 years. But I don't find in my review of the records any policy direction as far as the board is concerned. And so I would just ask you to think in terms of a future agenda item, what we may want to have as a policy in response to the genuine fear that many residents have communicated to me could be the impact on their property.
John, before we need to know, we would need to know exactly what the dimensions of the existing laws, rules are, the fire department and so forth. We need that first to sort of see where we're going and then go from there.
Absolutely. I just raise it because it was a budget item here, and there's been some communication from residents about their concern about the situation. We also probably need to communicate further about individual residents' responsibility for maintaining shrubbery that has a high fire potential. Looks green on the top, but is very dry and incendiary. Any other general comments on the budget? If not, it'll be on the agenda for approval with the assumption, unless you bring up something else, that there will be a 50-cent increase next year and that we will have a sizable transfer to the asset replacement fund from this year's surplus. Next item on the agenda is the OVA OGC draft resolution that Jack Abercrombie brought to us as part of his report. You have it in your packet on page 47. Whereas the Oakmont Village Association and the Oakmont Golf Club recognize the importance of each entity to the success of the other, and whereas both entities desire to formalize the mutual interest each has in the other, and whereas both entities desire to formalize the mutual interest each has in cooperating and working in unison on matters of concern and areas of mutual benefit, now therefore be it resolved that the board of directors of both entities pledge to work together to improve the communication, cooperation, and relationship between parties. Do I have a motion?
The motion would be to adopt the resolution.
That would get us started.
Which is, which in basic, is that we agree to work together toward our common goal. And if that's what, as I understand it, then I would place that motion on the table.
Moved by John Felton, seconded by Fran Diaz. Discussion?
Jim, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think the resolution is a good one. However, I believe the name of the OVA OGC Ad Hoc Committee, I would like to have that changed to Task Force. It is not an ad hoc committee, it is a task force. We tried to get it to be an ad hoc committee, but it was voted down at the previous board meeting. And the reason I say that is because being identified as an ad hoc committee has kind of lended itself to certain restrictions and regulations.
Thank you for the correction. Yep. That doesn't appear in the body of the resolution, it's just at the title of the page.
No, it doesn't.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
They also, there was a list of 6 or 7 suggestions that I can't find mine, but one of them was for the board to appoint a liaison to either that committee or a liaison to the OGC, and the OGC would appoint a liaison back to us. Is this, are we going to, should we consider that?
I don't see any reason not to consider it. I didn't see it as part of any recommendation, and I've lost track of the point that you bring up. So we'll have to ask Jack Abercrombie. Thank you, Jack Abercrombie.
Resolution is just as stated, did not imply any other action by this board. And I would just report that the OGC board has adopted the resolution.
Thank you. All in favor of adopting the resolution?
At a point of order, there's been a suggested name of the change. So I would say that we adopted with the change of ad hoc to the word task force and move forward with the change in the name.
I don't think the name change is in the resolution. So it's a title page that we mistyped, but it doesn't involve the body of the resolution.
Right. Call the question.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you for your work on this, Jack, on behalf of the task force. The item 11C is on the agenda because of our discussion at the workshop and because of the Bocce Club's representation during the open forum at our August board meeting. I think if any of you have traveled up to the bocce court, you certainly would observe that their sideboards and their end boards and their retaining wall board reflect a facility in really bad shape. The question becomes, how do we best address providing a facility that's in good condition? I think if our tennis courts were in the condition that the bocce courts are in, we have hundreds of avid tennis players here assaulting each one of us individually. So I'm open to suggestions as to when and how we should address this issue. That's why it's on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that the FIC had taken this situation up to a certain point, and as of a month or so ago, it kind of just went into limbo. Is there some way it could be picked up and looked at and evaluated as to which direction we should go?
I think it can be picked up and looked at, but there is no FIC at the moment.
I know.
So
how do you do that?
We need to decide how we want to proceed now, or if we want to defer action.
I think what I'm saying is that what FIC did do brought it up to a certain level and accomplished certain things, and maybe we could pick it up from that point and take a look at it and advance it.
Jim?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think what the chairman's saying, though, Herm, is that who's we? You know, who's this we going to pick it up? You know, that's the point he's trying to get at, and how we're going to proceed from there. I agree that I think we need to do something on it. It's been sitting in the back burner for too long. It is a recreational facility within our community, and that's one of our primary jobs, is to maintain and provide recreational facilities for our members. So I think we need to put together something like that. Herm does make a good point. I believe the FIC did do a lot of legwork already. I think a lot of it's there, and I believe the bocce ball group itself has got some information. So I think by having an executive committee, well, I don't know if you want an executive committee, but I put together a short ad hoc committee to do that, to grab the people from the bocce ball people group and the FIC and maybe a board member to work on that.
Mr. President? Yes, there are specific proposals that are of record with, I'm sure the Bocce Ball Committee has them, and FIC minutes would show those as well. I think the highest, I had quoted at one of our workshops that I was aware of one proposal that was made covering about $90,000, but I think there's another in place that was as much as $120,000. But that information and those plans are available to us from either of those two resources, either FIC or Bocce.
I was approached after the last meeting by someone who part of the bocce ball group, suggesting that they take another look at what they're asking for. The $100,000 number, I think it was something in that area, seemed awfully high. I went up and looked at it, talked to people and such, and essentially what you want to do is get it back into a good playable position, which means that the wooden rails around the ends and the sides need to be replaced so that you can play properly. And a few other minor things wouldn't come up to nearly that kind of cost. So I think what needs to be done is to take what's been presented so far and, as pointed out, sit down with the group to determine how to scale that back to a more reasonable number that we can afford, and then move forward on it. It's just been sitting on the back burner for a long time, and I think it needs to get addressed. Is there anybody here from Bocce Ball? Yeah. Well, with your blessing, I turn it over to comments from Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. Wally, you have a comment?
Yes, I think some board members have completely misunderstood what has happened and where we are. The FIC dropped the ball completely on this thing and turned it all over to the bocce club itself. Now, I had nothing to do with getting various bids. The two members of the club who did that, Jim Hughesby and Chris Tony, did all the legwork. And all the FIC did was each month tell them to do more. Last time, fortunately, they were not in a legal session, but they told the bocce club, now you have to go look at insurance and all kinds of things. It's just plain ridiculous. I was happy to see that group disbanded. At any rate, I gave you at the board meeting a month ago the proposals for the bocce courts. This has all been done. You have had it for a month to study. Evidently, some of you have paid no attention, which is unfortunate. Now you want to drag it out further because you haven't done your homework. You've had the numbers, and you say there is, all you have to do is some minor repair work to build up the sideboards. That would help considerably and make the courts playable, but it wouldn't solve the overlying problem. Then, in order to keep it playable, you would have to go back to adding more surface and more surface and more surface till you lost the sideboards again. That's been the problem the last 20 years. This solves the problem permanently with a surface that does not have to be added to every year to keep it playable. This has all been covered. This is what you were told at the workshop, and it's all here. To form another committee, the work's already been done. The problem now is, do you want to make a permanent solution and get it over with, or do you want to continue to pay year by year by year to have something that isn't going to work over the long run? When I did a lot of bocce playing a number of years ago, we had to get out the 300-pound roller every day and roll those courts before they were playable. Because as the group got older and new people came and said, no, we're not going to drag that roller out and roll the courts. We'll just add more surface. And this is where the problem came. We've never had any maintenance to speak of from the maintenance department as to the surface of the bocce courts. So this is where the bocce players now have this huge problem. And now is the time to take care of it.
And my name is Tony DeAugusta, 351 Mountain Vista Court. And I'm one of the members of the bocce club that when we went out and got the bids, it was requested for us to do by the FIC committee. The bids were not 100,000 or 100,000+. The bids were, we have them here, 43,300, and that would be one type of a surface and it would be complete. However, if we did a better surface which would last longer and require less maintenance, then the top dollar would be $70,880, not 100,000 or 100,000+. I don't know where those figures came from. But we have gotten the bids, we have talked to the contractors, we have gone out and visited the courts that they have constructed, and this is our recommendation to the board, that we would prefer the one for $70,880 because I think the association would be better off because it would require less maintenance and last longer.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. Is there there any sense on the board that this might be considered a maintenance project? And ask our new manager to evaluate the information and make a recommendation? Or would you like to go in the direction of an ad hoc committee?
Mr. Chairman, I think the recommendation for the new surfacing for $70,880 is the starting point for getting it in place so that it is an acceptable bocce bowling court. Then I think the thing that needs to be done after that is we have a valid maintenance program to keep it up and maintain it.
What do we have? Obviously, we have a certain amount of money allocated in the reserve fund for maintenance of things. I did not look at this. I should have, but I did not. What do we have in the reserve fund for this? Do you have any idea?
$14,000.
$14,000.
14000.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. President. Mr. President, one of the things that I would like Tony to come back perhaps and explain to you is one of the differences between the $43,300 proposal, the product, and the $70,880 is the length of the warranty. If you look at it dollar for dollar, the $70,000 replacement of that asset is the better value.
Evelyn?
I know that this discussion was covering higher fees, but I think what we need to keep in focus here is that whatever you do, and I'm speaking directly now to the Bocce Club, following a procedure that is now in place for any project that requires a bid, that you get 3 bids, and that we get plans, we get approval, and it goes to finance. And following that procedure, which is now in place and was approved in November the 12th, in 2012, that we would be more amenable to, doing what we can do in terms of the budget that we have at hand and going forward. The $120,000 is a memo that I made when I was sitting in on one of my last committee meetings before I became a board member. It may very well have been that one of your members had created a plan and presented it independently, because that was a factor that I referred to in my notes. I'm saying now that the figures you now have brought forward seem certainly more reasonable, but whatever we do, we need at least 3. Need them from bona fide contractors, and presented in a form. This is up to you now as the club. Present those 3 bids. Let's take it to finance, and we should be able to move on it if we can afford it. Thank you.
Evelyn, the higher number was what you received from, at that time, Silly's maintenance manager, Tim Fowle, because he had looked at and met with contractors locating a second bocce area down by the picnic grounds at the lower level on the west.
If I may make 2 further comments. One, the $14,000 you have in the facilities improvement budget is, of course, way understated, because no one during budget time was aware of the major problems. Once you have something that is broken down, I don't see how you can look at a false figure in a budget to have any bearing on the subject whatsoever. And secondly, they did go out and get 3 bids. Now you have to understand that bocce courts have numerous types of surfaces. And each of the companies that specializes in this kind of thing does a different surface. So it's pretty difficult to come up with everyone bidding on exactly the same thing, because each company does their own thing. It's not like a general contractor building a house. This is a specialized operation. And the bids that the bocce people got, and they got 3 of them, they also asked these companies what would happen if we take part of your bid and part of your bid and put them together, and this is what they've done. And this is where they came up with the $70,000. That's combining a partial bid from one company and a partial bid from a second company to come up with the best type of surface for Oakmont's bocce courts that will hold up the longest and will require the least amount of maintenance. So that's all been done. And to do that over again is ludicrous. It's been done.
May I make a suggestion? Since there is no FIC right now, can we request the Bocce Club to present the specific proposal to the Finance Committee, and as soon as we hear from the Finance Committee, this board will act on it.
But Wally, are you telling us that from a professional point of view, it's not possible for OVA to get 3 comparable bids?
I think
a step from apples, oranges, and lemons?
I think we could do that if we went out to general contractors who have not done bocce courts, and they're going to look at our specs and not understand the differences in the types of surfaces that can be done, et cetera, et cetera. This is a specialized thing. It's like the lawn bowling green. In constructing that lawn bowling green or reconstructing it in the late 1990s, you could only get quotations from lawn bowling green specialists, and they all did something different. And at that time, as I recall, the work was done from one company because it was the surface that was considered the easiest to maintain. And if you notice, we're spending $18,000 a year maintaining that surface, just to maintain the surface. And that is because it has to be planed and not mowed. The length of the grass in that is minute in order for it to be a surface that's usable for lawn bowling. The same thing applies to bocce, except it's a hell of a lot cheaper to maintain. Next to nothing once the proper thing is put in. And that's what the club has gone after, is what would be the best surface so that we would not have to pay a big maintenance cost every year to keep the bocce courts playable.
Wally, if I may ask you another question, would it not be reasonable for you, the bocce club, to make the decision as to which surface would be appropriate?
Yes, and they did. That's what was presented to you 30 days ago at the board meeting and gone over again at the workshop. And that's what you have. You have all of those bids. You have the specifications. You have everything in your package. It's all there.
All right, so
It does not need to be done over again.
Then you presented it to the board, and the procedure that should be followed, if you
Right.
don't have 3 bids,
And
is to submit it to finance.
And the letter that you received from the bocce people stated how they would like to see those bids combined into the best possible surface. So you have all that material. My suggestion would be that maybe you form a quick subcommittee of the board and meet with the bocce people if you want to go back over it again in detail. I don't have the detail. Jim and Tony do. They're the ones that did all the work. I'm just speaking for the bocce club at the moment.
Is there anything wrong with having the Bocce Club present that information directly to our Finance Committee?
Nothing at all.
With that, I would strongly request that that proposal go directly to our Finance Committee.
I don't think we need a motion to do that.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Do it.
The substance of the comments that I hear from board members and from members in the audience that have spoken seem to me to say that The Bocce Club has a preferred solution. They have some documentation as to the cost. So we would just ask you to take that to the Finance Committee for their consideration and subsequent recommendation to the board.
We'd be happy to do that, but I just wanted to find out that once we present it to the Finance Committee, where does it go from there?
To this board, if they recommend it.
And you will make the decision. You will prepare the necessary contract. What do we have to do? First of all, it was suggested by the FIC that we prepare contracts, insurance requirements, liability requirements, and we're not in a position to do that because we have no idea what OVA requires. So I would think that once it's approved, that the association would take the ball from that point on. And we'd be glad to, advise with you and sit with you at any part of it. But I don't think we're capable of saying what the requirements are of OVA.
My observation on that would be to ask our manager to have the maintenance manager work with this bocce committee to help you put the documentation together. And it should be done before it goes to the Finance Committee.
Okay, we can do that.
Is there any other pleasure on the part of the board regarding this item?
I may be way out of line on this, but as a member of a club that plays a game, to assume that there are people who play that game who are capable and in positions of getting bids and all this business stuff, I'm just blown away. I mean, if my knitting group, we had to start doing it, there's nobody in that group who would begin to be able to handle the contractual obligations that you're asking this committee to do.
We didn't ask them to do that.
You said they have to get their bids?
They have the bids.
But you require that of a committee of players. These are not business people necessarily. This to me is something that is done professionally by management, the board, I don't know who, but certainly not people because they want to play bocce ball. That you have to have somebody who plays bocce ball that has the capability of handling these kinds of business arrangements.
Sorry.
Hi. There's a huge disconnect here. Having been on the board, the process by which projects occurred were generated by the board. The FIC was to take direction from the board, not from the bocce club, not from anybody else, but the board. An end run has been done here. The board is in the dark, but the bocce has done some really, really good work in their research. Now we don't have an FIC, so it is very complicated. How can this group of bocce ball players create contracts and insurance documents and so forth without knowledge of how to? So it just seems that from now on, when committees go off on a tangent, it should be because the board told them to, not because some group came to them and told them that they needed to do this. So there's just a huge disconnect, and I think somehow it needs to be figured out as to how this can happen in the process by which we're supposed to operate.
I think you're right, Kathleen, and I would just simply make the observation that there was a huge disconnect before we got to this point between how the FIC chose to address the bocce ball club's activities and the bocce club. And I was only trying to suggest that with the professional assistance of our maintenance manager.
Right. But the disconnect was that the FIC took direction from the bocce committee and not from the board. The bocce committee should have submitted their needs in some way, shape, or form to the board. The board then gives it to the FIC, who does the homework and works with the bocce group to get it done.
Thank you, I see your point. So are we together before we pass on this, that the maintenance manager is going to work with the bocce club representatives to get the document to the finance committee. Okay? And is that all right with you, the bocce club people? Are we together on the same wavelength? Thank you.
The Finance Committee meets next Thursday at 2 p.m.
Mr. President, may I add a PS to this so that addressing now the bocce club, you don't have to get the insurance certificates. That's automatic, and it's usually provided by the contractor. So this is not a responsibility that you would have. If you have a contract in hand and you award or wish that particular contractor to do the job for you, that contractor will be advised by management of the certification that they would require in order to expedite the job. So it's not your problem.
The next item on the agenda is 11D, facility signage. We have had the question raised about whether we need all of the kinds of signage we had. We've had people say, how can we say what we need to say in connection with our facilities in a more attractive way and with less duplication? Since our workshop, I have talked with Carol Cotton, who originally, I think, raised this question in an open forum discussion, and she has agreed with the board's concurrence that she will attempt to assemble a committee that we could appoint that would work on the redesign and the rewording of signage in our facilities. I don't think we need a motion at this point until we have a recommendation for a committee, but if that course of action, asking Carol to put together a group, is acceptable to the board, we'll move on. Item 11E is issue of employee abuse and architectural violations. We've had several discussions of this, but more particularly, the question has been raised about whether or not one ad hoc committee can address both of the issues. Without any motion on the table, let's suspend the rules and see what the will of members of the board is, may be, in addressing this question.
Mr. President, I think the strong feeling on this is that these are two separate items. We have architectural violations is one thing, and that's something that we can even come up with a set of fines or something like that. Employee abuse or some other type of member action like that takes a different type of rules, and I think they should be completely separated.
I can certainly understand that.
Mr. Chairman, there's no question that whatever you come up with should be a written kind of document explaining what are the particulars, whether it has to do with the architectural committee or with the employee abuse. And I think maybe a place for it would be in our bylaws, but it definitely has to be in writing.
I think there, obviously, things have to be documented, but we also have to keep in mind that if you establish rules, you have to have due process in terms of applying those rules. And this brings forth a whole new set of activities that would need to go on. We certainly have received clear instruction from the association's legal counsel that these are both areas that we have the right to address. The question is, how do we as an association want to begin to get our arms around this? Jim?
One thing I think we'll need to take into consideration, and I'll probably save this for our further discussion later, but if you're going to sit there and institute a list of fines, Okay, now as you just pointed out, does that create a whole new entity within our organization that now goes around policing all of Oakmont? Because if you're going to sit there and put rules got to be applicable to everybody, and everybody equally. So that's something to keep in consideration.
You bring up the same kind of issue that has always been tossed around regarding our present architectural committee. The architectural committee is not a policeman. They don't go looking for violations. They respond to complaints. And we can address whether or not that's the thing to do, but that's certainly an aspect.
That's true, but up to this point, you haven't been dipping into people's pocketbooks either.
That's right.
I think to address this properly, it has to be, of course, it has to be in writing. There's a regular procedure to go ahead and set up something like this. But the consequences of poor behavior, threatening behavior, whatever you want to call it, don't necessarily have to be financial in terms of a fine. They can be restrictions on the use of the facilities here. You may correct me, Patricia, but we all have entrance cards that we have for the pools and many of the facilities. I think, can a card be disabled at the computer?
Yes.
So you don't have to go back and collect it. So, you know, what I'd like to see is a fair system set up. So people, there's privacy issues involved, but a hearing before the board or a special group, whatever we might come up with, and they should have a broad number of tools to work with. And it could be restrictions, it could be a fine, it could be a restriction on the facilities use, it could be a number of things. I like to see a broad number of choices that are established so that you can pick the appropriate action to take for any particular case, whether it's a problem of repeated misbehavior or a single issue, or it might just be a letter of warning. It could be a number of things. I don't like to see a restriction placed on that, but whatever's in writing, I think there should be a broad application of different things that can be used to address these problems as they come up. I've done quite a bit of research on the internet, and I've sent a few things out to the board from sites that I found about how other homeowners associations have addressed this issue. We are not alone at all. And so there's a lot of ground that's already been broken here. We don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel in many cases, but we have to find something that fits our use here. So I think we ought to go ahead and establish an ad hoc committee to go out and study this and come back with recommendations so that we can do this right.
Okay.
Pat Amadeo, former board member. Let me just tell you that this is not a new issue, and previous boards have handled abuse. We always separated the architectural committee issues, which went to the board in executive session, and the resident who was being who was being challenged had a chance to appeal to the board. We have had instances in which residents were called in executive session and met with the board, and their behavior was reviewed. In at least one instance, we did something straightforward. We eliminated their ability to use the facilities for a limited period of time. That's pretty straightforward. I mean, my suggestion is that residents would know not a menu of options, not a fine, but just you can have your privileges revoked for some period of time. So I wouldn't make it too complicated, and I guess I'd make it pretty straightforward.
Pat, I agree. Unfortunately, the issues that you took previously were never documented. So that, you know, we don't have that history to go back on, but I agree with you fully in all other respects.
Well,
Mr. President, can I talk for a second? Both problems having to do with architectural committee abuses and abusive behavior lack any kind of solid consequences for that action once it's been taken. So what we're talking about is whether we want to devise a system by which there are enforceable consequences against people that abuse employees, abuse other people, or violate architectural rules. And now what those consequences are what cause us to treat this as one subject, because they're similar. You know, we're either going to suspend privileges, we're going to fine people, or something along those lines for both of those. But the problem is that each one has a separate process by which you would undertake to impose those consequences. One would be through the architectural committee. One would, for the abusive issues, would have to be through a different, new procedure we would have to devise. But I think because of the different procedures, I think it's going to require two approaches, but I think that in terms of two committees, if you're thinking about that. But I think that the bottom line is that there has to be an umbrella set of consequences, you know, for actions that we deem to be inappropriate, that cover both.
We all seem to be talking about what we think the content should be, but we're not focusing on who's going to do the work. You know, this is an activity that takes some time, and it takes some focus and dedication. Excuse me, Noel?
Yeah, Noel Lyons. I would like to suggest that the board consider two committees. The architectural violation, you know, I'm not even sure it rises to the level of the problem because we've gone 50 years without a schedule of fines, but you're right. Our architectural rules don't really have an enforcement mechanism except negotiation, cajoling, you know, do the right thing. And that seems to have worked, but if it's not working, then we have a due process. We have clear architectural rules. We have a way of knowing whether somebody violates them. It should be pretty easy to come up with a system of fines for people who don't come into compliance. This other issue we're dealing with is much more complex. And it has to come down to not just adopting a set of rules for behavior. We've got all sorts of rules for behavior in society. Some people obey them and some don't. So we need to look at the combination of how do we empower our employees so they don't put up with any kind of inappropriate behavior. How do we isolate the instances to come out and find out, are we dealing with somebody who is just antisocial and doesn't know how to behave? Or are we dealing with somebody who's suffering from dementia, who isn't getting the care they need, who possibly is in a high-stress situation in their living and ends up taking it out on the people around them, including employees? These are complex social issues. They're not easily addressed by simply saying, we're going to establish rules of behavior and a system of fines. It's clearly a separate group. I think you need to address that issue.
Thank you. Appreciate your comment. Does anyone on the board have a motion about approaching either of these aspects? Any recommendations for leadership? Is this something we should ask the architectural committee to take on, for instance, in connection with?
Mr. President, I would strongly suggest, and I don't know if they'll make this a motion or not, that as far as architectural violations are concerned, that we ask the architectural committee to review what possible actions they might suggest in this area, including the possibility of a schedule of fines. And this subject has come up before too, and I can remember previous board members saying, no, we don't want fines. But it's still something we can look at again. But I suggest that that's something we can start with the architectural committee as our subcommittee for this particular action. And let's leave the employee abuse as a separate item for the time being.
In that connection, with your long history of architectural activity, would you mind drafting what you would consider an instruction from the board to the architectural committee and circulating it among the board members so that we can get them started on that aspect?
Mr. President?
Yes.
In regard to the other issue where there is abuse to our personnel or to anyone actually in the entire association, I would suggest that we we wait until we have a manager in place who may bring to the table some of their experience and guidelines as to how we might handle this, and then go forward from there.
That's certainly one avenue. I don't know that we need to wait. I don't want to put you on the spot too much, Hugh, but you gave us some good leadership on the AED project. Is this another one that, from the point of view of employee abuse, that you would consider taking?
Yeah, we've already kind of discussed this, sure.
Would you like to come forward at our next meeting with a recommendation of candidates to work with you on an ad hoc committee?
Yes.
And then we'll officially form it at that time.
Good. Will do.
Is that acceptable?
That's perfectly acceptable. This is going to be an exceedingly difficult situation because it's always going to be the who's, you know, as Noel suggested, the person, what's the person's character that's doing this? What's their problems? He may have mental problems. It's going to be he said, she said type of thing. It's not going to be easy, but we have to address it. That's all I can say.
Yes, Fran?
Yes. I've been working with the architectural committee, or at least listening to them lately, and I think they are doing a superb job. I think in the past some mistakes have been made, but definitely what is working now, what is happening now is working. And I would like to see the two issues divided too. I don't think there is a connection. We have printed the rules and regulations with regard to architecture, and I think we should continue to abide by them and let the architectural committee do that. I hate to suggest that this is something that's broken. I don't feel that at all. The bigger picture, as was just referred to, I think we do have to work at some length.
I don't think there's disagreement, Fran, about the job that the architectural committee is doing. I think our focus is to ask them to look at whether or not we can go farther through their efforts by developing a system of penalties that don't exist today. Right now, I think they feel frustrated at many occasions because they don't have an effective enforcement tool. So I think Herm is going to draft us an instruction to them to see if we can't give them more tools.
Well, I may have misinterpreted. I didn't understand they were frustrated. Just the opposite.
John, may I ask a quick thing? I'm wondering if perhaps the architectural issue could be treated at the first look, sort of like a fix-it ticket. If you get stopped by the police and your taillight's out, you get a fix-it ticket. If you fixed it, end of the issue. If it's not fixed, then perhaps would go before, whether it's executive committee or something like that, for a discussion of what the problem is. And if they refuse to fix it, then you've reached the point of, now what do we do? So it's already in place. Okay, then I'll sit down and be quiet.
I won't say thank you because that might be misinterpreted.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Over here. I like the idea of ad hoc committee because it is a very complex issue, and a lot of the elements that are causing the problems would have to be discussed. How you would handle, is it a one-time incident, or is this a situation where a person repeatedly is causing the problem? All those different kinds of things I think have to be considered and included in the documentation.
Thank you. We're on our way. Pardon, one other.
Mr. Chairman, Paul Wyckoff, 6550 Stonebridge. Regarding employee abuse, in our banks, we have cameras on the counters. What about the possibility of a camera in the offices and possibly microphone pickups, so if somebody starts getting abusive, the employee can turn on the microphone, the camera's already rolling, and then this he said, she said is easily dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments, Paul. So we'll pass on to item 12 on the agenda, unfinished business. Thank you. Sorry, lost track. John Felton wanted to have item 11F on the calendar to discuss, I think, expansion of our videography and live streaming.
So much of the problems that we seem to create for ourselves come from the communication that could be improved. When people have a better understanding of what's going on, there's less chance of going off on a tangent. And it really helps if everyone understands that we're all working toward a common goal. And toward that end, at the start of this present board, President Taylor set up our workshops. I think it's working out very well. We have a pretty good turnout. There are a lot of people who can't come. There are many very important points that are discussed there, and a lot of explanations of concerns that people have. And to do a better job of communications, I strongly recommend that we add the addition of the videotaping as we've done here, and put that online for all of our residents here to see. I know there are some cost issues involved, but I'd like to see what they might be before we make a final decision. But I am very strongly in favor of adding the video presentations of our workshops on a regular basis.
Any other comments? Pardon me?
If I may?
Oh, please.
At the present time, all of our live streaming falls to 2 or 3 gentlemen. Before we go forward on this, I think we really need to find out if they would be willing to consider that as an extension of their service to us, because if not, we need to look at other talents and abilities, because we are, putting it all on the shoulders of just a few people.
When we instituted this activity formally, even though it started with the annual meeting this year, we didn't formally adopt it until a couple of months later. And in doing that, based on a recommendation from the Communications Committee, I believe we said we wanted to track what the results were. Dutch Licklider has provided some information that suggests that there's something on the order of 50 people that watch us online, and that because the actual copies of the videography are available on a continual basis, like the board's minutes and so forth, that the numbers get up over 100. 200, thank you. I like the hand signals there. That they're now getting up over 200 as far as watching them on an after-the-fact basis. Perhaps for the next couple of months, if it's agreeable with the board, we'll continue to track that. And in the meantime, we'll ask Dutch and Gary to provide us some information on what it would cost us to go farther than we have at this time. Without objection, then, let's go to item 12A. That's the policy for committee appointments and operations. This policy was proposed by an ad hoc committee and presented to us by Wally Schill with a recommendation back on April 29th. It's now been published twice in the Oakmont News, and in your meeting packet you have a copy of the original proposal, and you have a red line entry of some suggested modifications to that proposal. It's up to the board as to how we proceed at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the amended policy of committee appointments and operations as amended in our package.
A second?
What was your last?
Second from
I said I move that we approve the policy for committee appointments and operations as amended in our package.
Do you mean adopt?
Excuse me, adopt, correct.
We have a motion to adopt the red line version of the policy that's in our meeting packets, and a second. Discussion?
Has it been seconded?
Yes.
Okay, I have some serious questions about this motion. This document as amended has not been published.
I don't believe it's required. I believe that we have to publish what was proposed, but that the board has the...
But there's substantial differences.
Yes. I understand that. I'm explaining what my understanding is the rules. I stand to be corrected, Herm. I'm not the law. Patricia, can you clarify for us?
You can proceed in two directions. You can publish this and go through the process, or you can adopt it now and publish it, and at the end of the publication period, then enact it. But it does have to be sent out to the members. However, you can adopt it now and then leave it unenacted during the comment period and make any amendments to that enactment at that time.
So if I understand you correctly, anytime we publish something, if we make some changes in what we publish, it has to be published again.
If they're substantive.
Yeah, substantive, I mean typos, stuff like that, you don't have to do. I looked through this, Herm, please, do you see some significant?
Well,
I see some...
go to 56 is numbered.
All right.
Unless otherwise directed, all standing committees shall report to the board monthly. And then he completely eliminates the list of standing committees.
Yes, he does.
That's a substantive, to me, that's a substantive change in this policy when you are no longer listing committees.
But isn't it addressed by saying that all standing committees will do this? It's not eliminating any standing committees. It's saying all of them.
Mr. President,
Let's continue the discussion with her.
I'm in agreement with you, so I just wanted to add a PS. But most people reading this would not know what the standing committees are. So I'm agreeing with Herm Herman. They should be itemized. It should be listed and a description of what they are.
Well, I would only suggest that if we change standing committees, then you have to go back and change this policy. So by eliminating the listing of them and simply saying that all of them are going to report, you eliminate the paperwork process of having to change your policy every time you change a standing committee.
And I have to agree with the chairman on that, simply because in their charter, we can identify where they are a standing committee right off the bat. And also, we do publish on a regular basis a list of our current standing committees, any other ad hoc committees we have, and that's available for everybody in the office. So I think those are well documented.
You know, this is not intended to eliminate anybody from the process.
I have
simplifying the language.
I have a couple other questions on the wording. Can I ask those questions?
Oh, please.
Paragraph under general provisions, A2, board liaison.
Which page are you on?
54. A2.
To me, this was a little bit unclear. Board liaison. Oh, it's gone? Oh, okay. Board liaisons. Parentheses, i.e. directors appointed by the president, close parentheses, are to serve as a resource if requested by committee. Does this mean that the liaisons are requested or just their service is requested?
Say that again?
Ask it again. Your mic got moved away.
sorry.
Operator error.
Okay. Board liaisons, directors appointed by the president, are to serve as a resource if requested by committees. Does that mean that if the liaison is requested or if their resource is requested?
I read that to mean if the liaison is requested.
In other words, if that committee does not request a board liaison, we do not provide that? Is this the inference in this?
That's the inference.
I disagree with that completely. I think it's essential that the board have liaisons on our standing committees.
I think there's some confusion here. And my take is, because I helped make the change, is that it gets back to what is the job of the liaison? And the question, you don't want a liaison that's interfering with the committee or telling them what to do or putting them under undue pressure. There is a resource, so that they're there. So if the committee has a question about what is the board really asking us to do here? Are we moving in the right direction to give them guidance? That's what it means. That's exactly what it means and no more.
Well, that's not just what it was explained.
That's the confusion that her firm is questioning.
It was just explained by...
So it needs to be stated better.
That's my whole point, was that number 2 is unclear.
Do you have a suggestion that goes with your thought as to how it's worded? Huh?
Mr. President?
Pardon me, yes?
If you go to the first paragraph, A1, it says, at the board organizational meeting, the board here's where you consider for approval the appointment of all existing committee members and committee chairs and an appointment. So if you take that as a given, the second one simply says that the liaison serves as a resource to that committee, doesn't take over the committee.
Right. I think if you turn around and put a period right after resource, board liaisons are to serve as a resource.
Yeah.
They should make every effort not to influence the actions or decisions of the committee unless they know.
That explains it, yes.
So cross out if requested
If
by.
requested is what's confusing.
Thank you. Are there other terms you'd like us to work on?
Mr. Chairman, again on A8, page 54, second sentence, the duties of each committee and responsibility for projects are as assigned by the board or as developed by the committee with the approval of the board. I think that's a reference to a charter. Why does it not include a charter? The charter will stipulate what the responsibilities are, and I don't see the necessity to have to come to the board for what are our duties. They should be specified in the charter.
Okay, under 8, it says all standing committees are advisory to the board. They shall annually submit their charter to the board for approval.
Oh,
Okay? Never mind.
Did you have another point, Herm?
You added a sentence on A8. They shall annually submit their charter to the board for approval. I agree with that, but we have to set up a procedure somewhere along the way to make sure that they do this, because this has pretty much been the policy in the past, but it has not been very well applied. The only other comment I have is in 12 and 13 on page 55. You eliminated number 13. Does that mean that that should be part of 12, is this all part of the same? You crossed out 13. The number.
I see what you're saying.
And my question on this is, it is highly recommended to assure that committees are well aware of the activities of other committees, that the committee chairs and their board liaisons meet on a regular basis, meet on a quarterly basis to discuss their activities. It will be the responsibility of the association vice president to call and chair these meetings. My question is, do you want to include, you've changed the inference in this a little bit, do you want to include every standing committee in this quarterly meeting?
It seems to me that's what this language suggests.
That's exactly what the language suggests, and was that your intent?
I don't see that there is a change from what was originally proposed by your subcommittee. So I'm not trying to change the intent of anything.
It looks fine to me the way it's worded.
But you want to keep it as a separate item, 13.
Yes, I think the misstrike.
Yeah, there was a misstrike on 13, I believe. Does that answer part of your question, Herb?
Well, no, it is highly recommended, this is the original wording. It is highly recommended to assure that pertinent committees are well aware of the activities of other pertinent committees. That the chairs and the board liaisons meet on a regular basis. My point is that I inserted the word pertinent in this to try to arrive at the fact that we need specific committees to get together on a regular basis, but we do not need every committee to get together. We don't need the
Bus committee.
The bus committee or emergency preparedness.
Well, no, you make a good point, but I think the way we originally wrote it and presented it for people to look at, when you put the word pertinent in here, that's subjective. What's pertinent to you is not necessarily pertinent to me. So if you're wanting to have if you want to list specific committees,
all right,
that's what you got to do.
I don't disagree, Jim.
And so I think what they're trying to do here is with, so we'll just say, I guess Mr. Felton is the vice president. As things go on, he'll assess the situation as it is and say, okay, right now we've got, we need to have these three meetings, these three committees attend because they've got a lot of stuff going on.
But it doesn't say that.
No, it doesn't, but it gives him a lot of leeway to do it. Because it doesn't tell him what committees to bring. It doesn't say all committees. It doesn't say standing committees.
It says that the committee chairs and their board liaisons. It says the committees. All I'm saying is we need to maybe be more specific.
How about designated committees?
Well, what's designated?
Well, the board president or the board vice president could designate those committees that have to be part of the quarterly meeting. And it's not a matter of whether they're pertinent or not, because all committees are pertinent.
Kathleen, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I have a comment on the charter issue. It's my understanding that standing committees are committees of the board. When a committee is established, a charter is what goes with that establishment. This is what you are charged to do. And to talk about having the committees make sure that their charter is resubmitted annually to the board seems silly because the board has written the charter, not the committee.
Unfortunately, the board has not written charters in the past.
But that's my point.
Exactly. Thank you.
It seems to me to make sense that the board should write the charter. It's like you give somebody a job and say, okay, tell me what you're gonna do. Instead of saying, we've hired you to do such and such, this is what you want you to do. It seems like it's backwards and that we ought to investigate making a change there to make it make more sense.
Excuse me, Tony.
John, may I? I'm Tony Lockowitz, and I'm the chair of one of these committees. Committee happening to be the Long Range Planning Committee. And quite frankly, I'm confused as to what's going on. As I understand it, you're making changes here in the public meeting, which is perfectly appropriate, but that there are also changes that have been made previously to a document that you're referring to as page 58 and page 59. All I have to go on is a newspaper clipping. And I really don't know what changes we're talking about right now. If you do make changes, and I'm not trying to obstruct your progress, please give it at least another month for public review so that as a committee chair or as a committee member or as a resident, we know where you stand before you take a final yea or nay vote. That's all I ask. Thank you.
I think your observation is the advice to the manager is about republishing anything that we were to adopt.
Are we also going to go forward now with some other changes? Because I have one point that I would like to bring up for clarification. Under general provisions, A4, the way that reads at present, it says appointees do not need to be members of the OVA. That's very ambiguous. And I've revised it to read, and perhaps it might be acceptable. Appointees do not need to be homeowners in OVA, but as renters may be appointed to committees as a resident of Oakland. Does that make? Because it says they are not members of the OVA. All members are renters are.
I'm sorry, they may have privilege, but they're not members. The only ones who are members of the OVA are those people who have voting privileges in the OVA, and they are property owners. That's all.
Evelyn, the difference is between member and resident.
Yes.
Members are property owners with voting rights. Residents live in Oakland.
But that's not, we're not discussing voting rights here. We're asking, or I'm suggesting a clarification, because if someone reads that, it sounds as if they don't belong here at all. They are not members of the OVA, but that's, the important point here is to indicate that a renter has the privilege to be appointed to a committee.
As a non-member.
I think
in our articles, John, it's in our articles of incorporation that plainly states that you do not have to be a member of the OVA to be appointed to a committee. But it also plainly states that a member of the OVA can only be an owner, period. Renters are not members of the OVA, but they may be appointed to committees, provided they are a resident.
What if it said this?
In our articles of incorporation.
Why don't you just say appointees must be at least, must be residents of Oakmont, and skip all the other confusing part?
Not having a copy with me, I
John, the problem with that is a member who is a dues-paying owner of a property can participate in the politics and the voting, but doesn't have to live here. So you can't do it that way.
I think the point that Evelyn is trying to make is maybe getting obscure here. She's suggesting maybe we could word it so that non-members or just residents may be appointed to committees rather than making it a back-end way. I think it's either here or there, but she was saying it could be worded more positively.
Well, maybe if you preface this paragraph with a sentence that explained that members are owners and residents live here, and then proceed to say that members and residents can belong to committees.
Excuse me. How about committee members must be residents of Oakmont?
But what if you're an owner and not a resident?
The sentence that I read, was it not clear? That appointees do not need to be homeowners in OVA, but as renters may be appointed to committees as residents of Oakmont.
Get your point. We'll need to work on it. Okay, where do you want to go, board members, with this document?
We have a motion to adopt it as amended. And that would incorporate these changes that we just talked about.
And then
It's
we're
been seconded.
required to publish it this way.
If you so desire.
I understand what you have to.
I think it's in the best interest of the association, future committees, and the board to publish this at least twice more and then enact it.
Can we have a withdrawal of the motion and a second?
Sure, I'll withdraw the motion.
Withdrawal of the second. And may we have a new motion to publish this revised
So moved.
document? Is there a second to publishing the revised document? Herman seconds. All in favor of publishing the revised document with the changes that we have talked about, so that I will work with the office to make sure that we get that published. And we'll take another go at it. Thank you. And the...
When we started this, how many months ago?
April is what I have down for.
We started, what was it, March?
We had hoped to... Nothing's easy. The last item of unfinished business is the West Rec seismic report. We only have a brief on that. Herm Hess, you want to tell us about that?
Okay. The background to this is that we had a quasi-seismic report that was included in the forensic study. It was quasi because it failed to mention any kind of standard to which it was being compared to. Then subsequently, we made arrangements to have a seismic study done. You not hearing me? On August the 7th, I accompanied the Roy Andrews, who is the structural engineer who conducted the seismic evaluation in accordance with the document ASCE 3103. This is a nationally recognized standard that is used to determine if existing buildings meet seismic requirements. He is in the process of finalizing his report, and he issued today an email to me telling me in summary what are the results of his review. And so I'll read it to you quickly. I am continuing to work on the report. It will not be complete in time for the meeting today. However, I will follow up my communication to Mr. Taylor by saying that the analysis according to the standard ASCE 31-03 have confirmed my perspective. The analysis shows the structural systems in the building are adequate and do not need any major improvements in order to comply with the ASCE 31 criteria. Some repairs and improvements will be required to be in full compliance. In my view, these do not seem extensive. Of greatest significance is repair to the base of the exterior walls, which shows significant wood decay and serious corrosion to some of the existing anchor bolts. Photos will be included in the full report to illustrate the observation. The decay has damaged the plywood sheathing behind the stucco, which comprises the lateral load resting system. Repair of the plywood would include removal of some of the stucco to expose plywood, removal and replacement of the damaged plywood, removal and replacement of any seriously damaged sill plate, and in the installation of additional anchors where existing anchors are corroded to such an extent that the cross-sectional area of the bolt is substantially reduced. Another area where the current building does not comply with the requirements of the ASCE document is in the roof framing, where connections intend to link various portions of the structure together during earthquakes are not in place at all locations. Some improvements to these connections will be recommended in the report. The recommended repairs to the damaged framing would be required of any building as part of a maintenance program. The improvements to the structural systems are, in my view, fairly common on buildings of this vintage and important to owners who wish their building to perform appropriately in the future. Costs for repair improvements will only be a fraction of the total cost for removal and replacement of the structure. Removal and replacement of the building is not warranted. Signed by Roy Anderson.
So we thank you, Herm. We don't have a final report, but we have some encouragement about the direction we might consider going.
And this is pretty much exactly what we got out of the forensic study originally. Exactly what we got out of it.
Yes, that's true, but it didn't reference the standard.
You're right.
So we look forward to being able to take further action on that. Are there any future board meeting agenda recommendations aside from two that Herman gave me prior to the board meeting? One, to discuss specifically our views about replacing the two swimming pool cabanas, and secondly, to talk more explicitly about negotiations that took place in connection with the vacant beauty shop.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put on the agenda the board action on the bocce ball courts.
I would like the board to consider the company vehicle. It's either due for expensive major overhaul. I hope that the facility maintenance manager will have an actual cost so that you can make a comparison on that, on the Ford Ranger.
Other items?
Based upon the outcome and recommendations that are due out at the end of this month, as far as pickleball is concerned, from the committee that's taking care of that, I would like to see an item on there that perhaps would show that the board supports moving ahead toward an answer for pickleball, and that will enable some of the discussions that are going on now to proceed as far as the tennis folks, and at least be able to get them to a position where they can set up a temporary playing area.
If you have a report back from your architect on the east, I would recommend that you put action for going forward with the restoration of the east locker rooms on your October, as well as the question about looking at the automated fluorinator fillers, starting with the west.
And you said the maintenance manager would have us information regarding that, right?
I'm hoping that he will have it soon enough to present to the finance committee, but I'm thinking that the board may want to put it on an agenda for discussion as this is being developed. And
also like to put in, I'm sorry.
And the other thing, of course, is trying to go forward with reopening the sauna, the men's sauna in the central
facility.
Thank you. Jim?
I'd like to put on there the East Pool swim lanes instead of lane ropes. And we do have the budget on the next agenda, is that correct?
That's right.
What about the pool chemical system? Is that something that we should
That-
look at right away, or is it, can we defer that away?
She just mentioned the automatic chlorination.
Oh, she did, I didn't hear it, I'm sorry.
Thank you, I have those items. I didn't appoint a taskmaster, that was an oversight on my part. You may come to my question.
Well, I have some notes here I dragged up, but I know that, I'll go quickly through them. The Bocce Club is going to present its package regarding repairs to the Finance Committee, but at its next October meeting, Patricia Arnold's going to be published the policy regarding committees, and Carol Cotton's going to submit names to the next meeting for signage committee, and I'm going to submit names for the committee to consider abuse of behavior. But I think do you have any more, Kathy?
On that one? Then there's the task you assigned, John, to Herm Herman regarding the AC suggested penalties, and then Hugh, the abuse ad hoc committee, and yourself to republish the policy for committee appointments as revised with the staff.
With that bit of business, we'll go into our executive session on adjournment, dealing with architectural enforcement items, delinquent accounts, and personnel matters. Meeting stands adjourned.